Good afternoon and welcome everyone to our online information and support session. My name is Kathleen Helgeson and I'm the coordinator of the Patient and Family Resource Center. I'm joined today by Tiffany Skomro, our yoga teacher at Seven Oaks Hospital Wellness Institute. Together we will be talking about the healing impact of yoga and inviting you to try out a few poses. We are very pleased to offer this webinar with the generous funding support of the Cancer Care Manitoba Foundation. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're meeting from all regions in Manitoba, the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, and Dene people, as well as the homeland of the Red River Métis. It's important for us to foster inclusion and reconciliation and encourage others to do the same. Before we continue, there are some basic Zoom features I'd like to explain. You'll notice as an attendee, your microphone and your video are turned off. If you have a question for Tiffany at any time during the webinar, just click on the Q&A icon on your screen and type your question. You can also choose to ask that question anonymously by checking the Send Anonymously box before you click on the blue arrow to send. My coworker Ellie is, as always, off screen here, and she will be helping manage your questions as they come in. You may notice Ellie today as she relays the questions to us, since we're in a different setup in this room. So it's my pleasure to now introduce our guest today. Tiffany Skomro is a yoga instructor for us at Cancer Care, and she has began practicing yoga in 2010, and it's become an essential part of her life. Through her own journey with anxiety, she discovered yoga's ability to heal, and she believes that everyone has the ability to practice yoga and that the world would be a better place if everyone felt its experience. Tiffany is a registered yoga teacher and is certified in Yin Yoga, Yoga Nidra, and Restorative Yoga. She recently became certified in Yoga Thrive, a program for people living with and beyond cancer. She currently leads our yoga and cancer program at the Wellness Center. Welcome, Tiffany.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I think that probably many of our attendees would relate to your experience with anxiety and probably wonder what is it about yoga do you think that offered you a way to cope with that?
It's interesting because when I came into yoga, it's so long ago, I don't remember specifically, but what I did notice is there wasn't anything explicit. There was something more in terms of when I practiced yoga, I felt better. And then when I stopped practicing yoga, I noticed the change. So for me, one of the way anxiety comes up in my life is insomnia. So then I noticed that, okay, I need to get back to the mat. And then when I do, that's when I notice the change. So, for those I practice with, and, for those who I share my practice with, I've told them that yoga saved my life because I can't not do yoga, really. And it sounds so, like, is that for real? But I think that's how I came into it. It's a felt experience. So, yeah.
That's an excellent way to explain it. Just that it's a felt experience.
You bet.
How would you describe for people that aren't familiar with yoga, how would you describe it as a practice?
And you know what, I think there's different ways that people view yoga. And so often it's thought of just the poses or shapes or, these things that you're doing with your body, but it's actually so much more. There's actually, when you think about what yoga means, it's to join or to make whole. And so it's not just the body, but the entire, your entire system, your entire being. And so it doesn't distinguish where your body ends and where, your mind begins. It views everything as one. And so yoga itself actually has, if you get really into it, is 8 limbs. And so those are just things that include ways of being. But what I also really bring into my practice, and a lot of yoga instructors do, is your breath work, your meditation, your concentration, right? So it really cultivates something that's a bit more deeper, and then it allows for that connection.
One of the ways that I've heard yoga kind of explained is it is almost like a philosophy. It's a way of living.
Yeah.
There's ethical and moral guidelines to follow as well. So it's not only a relationship with oneself, but it also encompasses our relationship in the world and how we relate to other people.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, it's almost like there's a spectrum and nothing can really be put in a box, because you have some, who don't necessarily want to, go into that aspect of yoga, because there is a deep and rich philosophy, right? So you go into your yamas and niyamas.
Mhm.
But it's not only that, you go into sort of the, energy bodies, your koshas, and all these other sort of things that you can really dig into. But I think it's up to each individual just to see how they go through that.
Right.
And so it doesn't necessarily mean, because sometimes they'll be like, well, yoga, is it a religion? And it's not, right?
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
depends on what perspective you come from.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's has such a rich history because it dates back at least a couple thousand years, right? So
Yeah.
it's like if you ask somebody, well, how do you practice, Christianity there or another, kind of philosophy or something that's been around for a long time, there's
Yeah.
lots of different ways of interpreting a practice and how you put that into practical experience in your own life.
Absolutely.
So do you think that yoga is suitable for people that have been diagnosed or been going through cancer?
Absolutely. And so, in fact, so this is what's interesting, right? So you have all this rich history and now science is catching up, right? So, for those who've been practicing or know yoga and they've been in yoga forever, they're like, yeah, of course we know this because it's their felt experience. But what it is now is the science is catching up. And so as science is studying yoga, it's like, oh, yes, now we're able to prove what we actually, kind of know intuitively. And so there's research being done that shows that exercise is both safe and beneficial at any stage in a cancer experience. So this includes pre-treatment, this includes during treatment, post-treatment, and in survivorship. So there really is that whole spectrum that has been shown to benefit.
So right along the continuum, right from the point of, pre-diagnosis, diagnosis, that there's ways to modify a practice so that you can continue to practice all the way throughout.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And benefit from it in lots of different ways.
Absolutely. And I think that's what is really important to keep in mind is that there's a whole range of what yoga can be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be adapted to where you are in a given day. And yes, some days you might not want to come to the mat and that's okay, but that's also honoring yourself. That's also yoga.
Right. And just breathing itself is yoga and knowing how to control your breath and use your breath in different ways and use different breathing techniques and
Yes.
the meditative aspect of it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So you can practice yoga without actually even doing any of the physical poses themselves.
For sure. Absolutely. Just sitting, right? If we're just sitting here, that's a pose, right?
Exactly. Yeah, great. Are there some restrictions though that people need to be mindful of if they have a cancer diagnosis and they would like to begin practicing yoga? Are there certain things that we should be watching out for?
Absolutely. Again, I would say, and I think what's really important is communication. So first would be with health practitioners. So whoever is looking to start yoga, talking with your own health team and kind of figuring out what's best for you, what your restrictions are. Because then if you get that kind of green light, then talking with your yoga guide, right, your yoga teacher, and talking through what those are like, right? So I think that's the first part is knowing sort of what should and shouldn't be done, especially from some, a medical practitioner tends to know those sort of things.
Yeah.
And then also making sure some considerations include allowing time after surgery to heal. So if there's surgery taking place, just like with any activity, any sort of guidelines that come in, that would also come into sort of doing more of the physical aspects of yoga. And then if you're experiencing severe pain or fatigue, so things that just where you really aren't feeling well as it is, that's maybe some things that would also kind of signal just to kind of take it down.
Yeah. And I would imagine too that if people had some conditions and maybe things like lymphedema, or if they had peripheral neuropathy, which might affect balance, and other things with just maybe some respiratory issues. These are all things that it's really important to share with your yoga teacher because they're going to want to be aware so that you can practice safely.
Absolutely. And I think that's what really needs to be stressed is to have that communication, not only like as you start your practice, but as you continue your journey, because, as we go through our days, we change, right? I end up falling, I end up bumping into something or whatever it is, but, that's always to kind of let your yoga teacher know that, because then they can adapt for that and, be mindful of that.
Yeah, on a day-to-day basis. And people's sense of wellness changes too, right? Some days they might just have really good energy and other days they they won't. And,
Yeah.
and that's important to gauge that too.
Yes.
I guess that's the key, and we'll talk about that later too when we talk about safe practices to listen to your body,
Absolutely.
right? And if you're not listening to your body, and then that's sometimes when people push themselves or get injured doing any type of
Absolutely.
exercise or movement. So what are some of the things that you know, I guess in terms of other cautions or disclosures or risks of practice should people be thinking about?
I don't know. For me, I think it's still sort of the same in terms of just listening to yourself and being aware. And I think that's, again, a big part of it is just creating that sort of awareness.
Right. And then having that discussion, that open discussion.
Yes.
Yeah. And having you're consulting with your doctor, your medical team, first of all,
You
to
bet.
say, would it be appropriate for me to do this type of practice?
Yep.
And we'll talk a little bit about the ways that practice can be modified as well.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other, you know, benefits that we can look at from doing a practice of yoga?
That's a big one, right? And this is especially where science is coming in. And then that includes the benefits that has been found for those living with and beyond cancer. A lot of research is being done out of the University of Calgary, which is where the Thrive program comes to. So it's really just kind of neat to see how they are working with people who are living with cancer and what, you know, comes from that. So yoga itself enhances the physical, psychological, and cognitive outcomes. So that's been, you know, proven through science. It addresses things like stress, depression, as I've discovered, anxiety, so that, you know, our mental state and well-being. It's also been found to give back a sense of control, right? Because you're able to take things back into your own, you know, your hands and what you can do and carry through. It can affect treatment-related side effects, physical functioning, cancer-related fatigue, especially the program Out of the Wellness, which is restorative, really focuses on getting to that rest, right? So there's a lot of fatigue that can be experienced. And so, you know, having people come to the mat just going, I'm just done. But then they come and they're like, oh, okay. You know, you get a little bit of that, you know, you feel better because you're giving yourself time to address that insomnia, which I've even talked about before. And then things that, you know, we've even mentioned here in terms of it can work with or benefit the lymphatic system, drainage, lymphedema, venous returns, bone building, strengthening, especially if it's more active, weight bearing. So if you're doing more standing per se, doesn't mean you have to do anything extreme, right? And then strengthening the immune system is even one of the things that can be found.
Yes,
so
a lot of great benefits. And the cancer-related fatigue for a lot of our attendees, I know that's a very debilitating side effect from cancer is just that type of fatigue where it interferes with your functioning.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people really want to or feel that they can't do exercise or activity or movement just exhausts them. But if you have a practice that like yoga, you can actually find that it is energizing. It's restful and energizing at the same time.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting thing that goes on there that there's through the movement and through the focused attention that it brings more energy to the body.
Absolutely.
And it can be, you know, and it doesn't have to be a demanding practice. But you're also right, I think you said about the strengthening and that's something that as older attendees and you know have to be very mindful of as well as is falls. And I mean that's something that we see in our older population throughout Canada is that 1 in 3 older adults will fall during the year and at least have at least one fall. And when you fall as an older adult, more things can go wrong and more it can be, you know, can be very, very destructive, you know, like to have a fall.
For sure.
So if yoga can help with strengthening and with balance too, that's something that people can really benefit from.
Absolutely. And it's a matter of adjusting to where, you know, you're at, right? Because balance can look like one extreme, which
Yeah.
I wouldn't even practice. Because I'm like, I know my limitations, I honor myself. But there's so many other different ways that you can look at. And when I teach, I also teach, those who have, limitations or older demographic. And so it's amazing what can be done, especially with the chair or, anything that they put their mind to. So
just I guess we could probably just notice, or maybe you're noticing that from where you're sitting at home, but we have a book right there that's just on display there while we're talking about chair yoga for seniors. It's one of the books that we have in our library resource center here that you're always welcome to borrow. So but yeah, this is what we know about yoga, is that it's a very flexible practice that it can be modified for anyone.
Exactly. The other things that I did want to mention, though, is that what I found really interesting when we were taking the Yoga Thrive program is just how, because you would think sometimes that if you're, looking at doing this sort of activity during treatment, that it may not seem as intuitive. But what research was found is that it actually reduces your recovery time, if I think that's sort of how they were phrasing it. And then reducing risk of reoccurrence, mortality, things like that. So really kind of showing that there is benefit just to being active while going through treatment and just taking care of yourself. And it doesn't have to be, the extremes, right?
It doesn't have to be intense. So just, any movement in general, any physical activity is shown in the research shows that it's going to increase recovery times and also perhaps prevent the reoccurrence of cancer and help prevent the reoccurrence of cancer. So there's lots of good reasons to want to do some type of practice. Any type of physical activity, of course, is valuable as well. So one of the things that that yoga is known for as well is that sense of connection and community. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that. So that's, I think, one of the other things that the studies have shown is that having that sense of community is also really important. So it's sometimes, especially in this day and age, we really feel isolated. I think that's something that we all feel, especially because we don't have that same social connectivity, the same support network. And so what's been shown is when you have that community, that connectivity, that also supports the healing and going through through your journey. And so what yoga has is what's called Sangha, and that's called community. And that's where you have that sense of togetherness. And that's what's really important. And so the two also kind of work together that way as well. It's kind of a neat sort of circumstance that they comes that way.
I think when people do practice, together or with other people, and again, it doesn't have to be a large group. You could be practicing just with a friend or practicing with your partner, but there is a sense of like supporting each other in the practice, not competing against each other in what you're doing, which is nice too. And I think that's one of the best words of advice I'd heard about practicing yoga is to have no goal, and to do less. And that's
hard.
But it's also really helpful to hear that if I do less, I'm doing it right.
Yeah, you are. But you know what? And I think that kind of speaks to another point, though, when it comes to sort of risks or things to be wary of, is in our society, we're just so often, myself included, is that strive and drive, right? So you just want to achieve what's the next thing. I have to do things and you need to keep going. And so even if I've seen when, people have come to that restorative program, that they have a hard time because they're just so used to going. And I'm like, well, why aren't I doing anything? And there's stillness, which there's a beauty. And you can see when people allow themselves to experience. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges, because when we have that strive and drive, we're in this sympathetic nervous system state, right? And so we're just, wired up. And that's where we have that fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And we really need to just downshift. And that's where yoga comes in too.
And it's so helpful in terms of relieving that stress. And for cancer patients, that's something that they're going to be carrying around with them quite intensely at times.
Absolutely.
An outlet where you can let go and relieve some of that stress. It's so healing. It's so important for the body, to recover. As you said, we have to strike that balance, right? It can't always be stress.
Yeah.
You have to be able to bring it down.
Right.
And you're right. A lot of people in our society are so used to go. And I mean, I notice that even when I'm driving, it's like, why is everybody in such a rush? It's such a rush all the time, and it's the nature of our society. And so to slow down is really challenging for a lot of people.
It is.
It's really challenging, and that can be the hardest. Some of the hardest poses for some people to do are the ones where they're doing nothing.
Yes, absolutely.
How do I do nothing? Like it feels like you're doing something wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, for sure. And I think that's also why there's different types of yoga. And so, you know, perhaps if that's something that's really hard to come to, then there is the more active kinds of yoga that, you know, could be more suitable versus, you know, being more sedentary. But recognizing there are the benefits of that stillness and that sort of, you know, especially where meditation comes in, right? Because you can just be with yourself and just try and, you know, bring it down. That's why I always kind of do this motion of like, you're up here, you know, and you're, you know, just that nervous system state and just letting yourself just release, right? And not do.
Yeah. And also the idea of like, of getting out of your head and getting into your body, right?
Yes.
That we operate up here all the time, and then to drop down and just be settled in your body is such a nice feeling.
It is, but it can be scary.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to recognize and name and, you know, be really aware of. And I think that's okay. You know, we don't always have to, you know, be down in our bodies, and we just, you know, if we feel something, then you just let it go. But it's something that I think is also important to really, you know what you're experiencing, because through that comes, you know, one of the yamas is ahimsa, or loving kindness. And so, you know, what I've even said, I honor myself, right? In terms of, you know, maybe looking at a screen once in a while, or, you know, being a bit fidgety, although I really want to sit cross-legged, but it's okay, right? And that's where I think we are so hard on ourselves.
Very true.
And so recognizing that if you're getting frustrated, to let go of that too, which is of course really easy to say, but that's the work, right?
Yeah. I like the idea of having no goal.
Yeah.
It takes the pressure off where you're just like, I don't have to accomplish anything.
No.
I can just be here and do this, and that's enough.
And breathe.
Right. Yeah. And just breathe. That's enough. And you're doing yoga. Right?
Exactly. As long as you're breathing, that's yoga.
Yeah, very much. So when we talk about the ways that yoga, you know, it can be practiced, and there's so many different ways, so many different styles of yoga. But if we look at somebody with real mobility issues, if there's people out there that are, you know, are walking with a walker, or that have a cane, that can't imagine, you know, bending over to touch the ground, let alone sitting down on the ground, how can they do yoga? I mean, we talked about chair yoga, but is that enough? Like we can just do it from the chair?
Absolutely. I realize I use that word a lot, but so some of the yoga that I do teach, so chair yoga for, you know, the older aged and limited or recovering even. So if there's injury demographics, I have people who, you know, people in a wheelchair, people who have walkers. I teach out of Misericordia with a Prime program, and, you know, those are very, you know, limited folks who won't be able to get up off their chair. And so just even working with them, and it's just amazing how they just sink into it, because they just love, like some of them will even just sit there and listen. And so this is like, it doesn't have to be something in that case, but even in a yoga studio, I've heard, you know, from other yoga teachers about how you have someone who loves their Sangha, who loves their community and loves being in yoga, but then they just can't do it because of, you know, they're just really not feeling well. So they will just come lay in Shavasana. So that's just literally laying down on the floor the whole time and just be with the community. And so that's like, and that's really what it's all about honoring yourself. And so just knowing that there really is that range, and you don't have to look like a pretzel, because I certainly don't, or you don't have to look like me, because I'm, you know, I'm me and you're not, right? And so really whatever you look like is what's most important.
Yeah. I think it's really important to find a place where you do feel well received like that too, right?
Yes.
And you do feel a sense of connection, because you can have a difficult, you know, experience anywhere with any type of activities that you engage in, and that sense of feeling like you belong and you're accepted and you feel welcome is really, really important to feel that way.
Yeah. It's funny because you reminded me, I actually started yoga like even before, but it was through a place I won't name, but what happened, it was like I'm not so bad now, very inflexible, like touch my toes, not going to happen. And I was just like, I knew there was benefits of yoga, you know, knowing there was some anxiety, I wanted to come in. And then the teacher was very much like, no, this is what you need to do. And you need to look like this. And I was done. Right. And so knowing that those, you know, they're not common, but you know, if that happens, try not to let go of the practice, but just find a different space. Yeah.
And the good thing about, you know, the practice too of yoga is that if you do have mobility issues, doing the practice is probably only going to, you know, help you, support you, and strengthen, and you know, the range of mobility that you'll be able to achieve. So even if you feel at this point you don't have that, yoga will help you, you know, along the way to gain greater range of motion and
absolutely
mobility.
I know there's one person who's amazing, and it's a treat as a yoga teacher just to see the change, and so has some severe limitations. I think it's scleroderma. I don't remember what it is, with the bone sort of freezing. And so when he would start, you know, movement was incredibly limited. And now he's like, look at me, I can actually reach on the top shelf. And I'm like, you've done that work. It's so crazy. Yeah. But it's that commitment and that felt experience and seeing that change.
So I guess like with anything, you need to do some research. You need to look into like, how can I practice? Where can I practice? Do I practice at home? How do I build a home practice? And you can certainly do that as well.
Yeah.
There are so many styles of yoga, and people may not realize that there's so many different ways of practice. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the ways it can be, like the styles of yoga that are out there?
For sure. And it's kind of funny, during the last yoga and cancer program, the question came up, and it was like, oh, well, you just opened up like Pandora's box, right? But the way I kind of view it is a bit of a spectrum, right? So what you have is, on one end, you might have more of that activity. So that's where you'll see these flow, always moving. And then there's a meditative component to that, right? So you have like your, you know, vinyasas and things that you kind of do from there. Next, you'd probably say there's more of the hatha type of yoga, and that's where you'll see props. You kind of hear of this guy, Iyengar, those sorts of things, and that allows you just to build some different intents in how you come into the poses, and they all have different sort of benefits in what you do. And then kind of even going further, you have yin, so that's where it's done primarily on the floor, not always on the floor, and that's where you do longer holds, and it allows you to go more deep for the releases there. And then even more so is your restorative. And that's where you just find complete and utter stillness, complete support with props. And, you know, if you come to the restorative, you'll see like, why do I need so many props? Like I need a cart to bring them all, but that's how much you get supported on the floor. And then there you kind of have the little variations in terms of like Kundalini with sort of energy work. And then you have Yoga Nidra, meditations, you know, things like that. And of course, chair yoga.
Right. Yeah. So if people are interested in finding out about where they can practice and you know, where they can find out more information, we can get Allie to maybe post some information about signing up for our the cancer care program that is led by Tiffany, as well as we can talk about resources we have in the library if you're interested in checking out some books, and just any questions that you may have, feel free to contact us.
Yeah.
The Patient Family Resource Center.
Yeah. And there's some really great studios, I'd say, in Winnipeg. So just to explore them. And then the other thing to note is most of them have a beginner, like a sort of an introductory kind of pass that allows you just sort of kind of feel things out and then talk with the teachers, talk with whoever owns the studio. And just ask questions and see, and you'll kind of probably get a sense of, you know, how that works for you or not. So
I think that's a really key and really important point that we've been wanting to make, is to talk to the teachers that you're, you know, if you're interested in taking a class, find out what to expect, what it's going to be like, let them know as much about you so that they can help you to have a supported, safe, you know, beneficial practice. So yeah,
for sure. And I think that's sometimes, you know, speaking from the teacher side, it's a bit of frustration if someone's not experiencing if they're experiencing something more adverse and then it's not communicated, because the worst thing we would want is for someone not to come back to the mat.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's what we want to do, is we want to support you, because that's sort of that strive and drive. There's no point in suffering through it.
No.
That's, and
No.
there's no benefit in that for anybody.
No,
So
it's not yoga.
no, it's not yoga. That's what we're trying to,
No,
go
not at
through the
all.
suffering,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so no suffering.
No suffering.
Yeah. So we are going to move into a few poses right now, and Tiffany's going to be leading this. And so we do want to make sure and prioritize that our patient's safety is key here. So we want you very much to listen to your own body. So you don't have to do any of this practice if you don't want to. Just sit and observe is fine too. But know your limitations. If something doesn't feel right, that we go to move into something doesn't feel right for you, just stop and don't do it. If you're sitting, make sure that your chair is stable and supported, that there's no wheels on your chair. We don't want your chair sliding all over the place if you're reaching for it. And also that if there's no, big obstacles around you, we don't want you bumping into anything if we stand up. So also, if you feel lightheaded or dizzy in any way, any discomfort whatsoever, please just stop, sit down, take some deep breaths, and we'll get started. So
yeah, this is exciting. Well, thank you. And very important and very well introduced. Because I think that's, when we talk to that whole principle of listening to yourself and honoring yourself, don't look like us, right? Mm-hmm. We're not going to look like the same either. And so do what feels right. If you find your body's talking to you, back out, and I'll, kind of give you some ideas of how to come in. So I'm going to back up so you can see my legs, not like you need to, but just sort of how we're situated in the room. So you can see I'm always in bare feet. I love the connection with the floor. You can have your shoes on or whatever feels best, but what you want to do is right now is just find a bit of a comfortable seat. So when we start a practice, we tend to just go inwards. So for me, you'll often find me with my eyes closed. So I invite you to do the same, and if not, you can just soften your gaze and just rest it on something in front of you. And we're just going to start by breathing. Like we said, just by simply sitting and breathing, we're already doing yoga. And we're going to start by doing a little bit of a check-in and notice how your breath is moving. Just notice its properties, whether it's moving fast, slow, smooth or choppy, and just being with it as it is, not trying to change it or judge it, but just to watch it like a child would watch a butterfly, not trying to change its movement, but just observing it from the outside. This is what we call a witness perspective, and allows us to have a bit of that detachment and just to be with what is. And then just gently open your eyes. And we're going to start with some movements in our shoulders. Often our shoulders carry so much tension. You might be circling your shoulders. You might be shrugging them. Just moving in a way that makes sense for you. And trying to get into all the different parts of your shoulder joint. If you're going one way, maybe switching directions, depending on what that looks like. Even if your movements are small, and imagining it. It's all that's needed. And then we can come to stillness. All right, let's inhale. Sorry, I'm going to do my right arm. We talked about left and right. So what I'm doing is my left arm up, but you might be doing your right arm. So I'm going to actually switch that. My apologies. Often mirror. We're going to raise our right arm up and bring our elbow towards the sky, sitting as tall as can be. And feeling into our breath here. On your next exhale, we're tilting to the left, opening up through the side body. On your next inhale, rising up. Exhale, let's release that arm down and bring it across your torso. And let's just hold with that second arm, just opening up through that shoulder. On your next exhale, we're going to twist a little to the left. On your next inhale, coming back to center, let's release that arm down. All right, second arm, let's inhale that left arm up. Elbow comes towards the sky, hand towards the back, and sitting as tall as can be. Allowing yourself to feel into your breath. On your next exhale, tilting to the right. Your next inhale, rising back up. Exhale, let's release that arm down and then bring it across the torso. You can hold with that second arm. On your next exhale, we're going to twist to the right. On the inhale, coming back to center. Exhale, let's release that down. All right, let's do a little bit of work in our legs. I always like to come towards the edge of my chair. And we're going to bring out that right leg long. See if you can keep those toes up to the sky if you can. Your left foot is nice and grounded, so you're kind of feeling stable. Options for your hands, they can be on your thighs, they can be on the hips, or you can hold onto the chair. Whatever feels best for you, one's not better than the other. All right, let's inhale. Let's sit up nice and tall, creating length and space in the spine. Exhale, we're folding at the waist, coming forward. Making sure we're breathing and allowing our breath to flow.
I feel like this is working my abdominals.
It depends. Where you feel it is where you feel it. You know, you might feel the opening in the back of your leg, maybe in your back, maybe in your abs, in your stomach, for sure.
It's not in a bad way, but
No.
just that you just leaning forward felt like, oh, I'm in
Oh, hello. All right, let's inhale ourselves back up. We're going to bring that leg a little bit out to the side, or maybe a lot. You get to choose, kind of readjust. All right, once again, let's inhale, sit up nice and tall. Exhale, folding forward at the waist. On your inhale, let's rise back up. Now we're going to do a little bit of a twist. So our nose is pointing to that second toe. And on the exhale, we're going to tilt towards that extended leg. It's a little bit different. I once had a student ask me, is the goal to have tension in your body? And I said, no, the goal is to release the tension so that you can create that space and opening. On your next inhale, let's rise back up. Let's scoop that leg, bring it back to center. So we'll do the second side. All right, left leg up now. Same as the first, same options for your hands. On an inhale, let's sit up nice and tall, toes to the sky if you can. Exhale, folding at the waist, coming forward. Appreciating that one side of our body is not the same as the other. So if you're feeling a bit different here, that's perfectly normal. We may appear to be symmetrical beings, but we're not. On your next inhale, rising back up. Let's bring that leg out to the side again. You get to choose how wide or how far. Yeah, readjust as you need. All right, inhale, making sure we're sitting nice and tall. Exhale, folding at the waist, coming forward. Breathing and allowing your energy to flow. Your next inhale, rising back up. Let's do a little bit of a turn so that nose points to that second toe. And on the exhale, tilting towards that extended leg.
So how important is it to move with the inhale, move with the exhale? Is it?
That's yoga. Otherwise, it's stretching. It's a very good question, and one that is often asked. There is intention of your inhales and exhales and how it moves your energy, and that's part of pranayama. And if you don't, it's not like the yoga police are going to come and arrest you.
No.
All right, so inhale, let's come back up.
You don't want to, you especially don't want to be holding your breath, because I notice when you're doing something that's challenging, the tendency is just to hold your breath.
Absolutely, and that's not what you want.
Yeah, and you notice yourself sometimes like, I'm holding my breath. I'm not breathing in and out evenly. I'm just.
Yeah, which is why you'll often hear yoga teachers give that reminder of just breathing, and it sounds like, really? What do you think I'm doing? But sometimes you're not, especially in some things when you're doing a balance or a twist. Absolutely not. Do we want to do a bit of standing poses?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're going to come over chairs face us. So if you wanted to join us with a standing, just to come to stand behind your chair. So just making sure that, again, this was mentioned, not to have any sort of wheels or anything like that. So from here, what we're going to do is hold on to the chair, and we're just going to step backward. So this is kind of a chair version of downward dog. So it doesn't matter how far you come back, but you can come all the way back if you'd like. And just feel that opening in your back body. Just imagine your tailbone moving away from your chair. So that's sort of that lengthening, sort of that creating that space that we talk about.
So in our head is, our ears are.
Yes, you know what? You can have your ears in line with your arms. If it's if it's in a different place, that's okay too. On your next exhale, we're just going to bend our knees. Maybe it's a little, maybe it's a little more. Then on your next inhale, we're coming back up to standing. All right, another shape here. We're going to take a little bit of a stance away. And what we're going to do is we're going to have our right leg forward and our left comes back. So a bit of mid stance here. And you can have your hands off the chair or not. You know yourself best, always making sure that you're nice and stable. If you'd like, you can always raise your arms up and exhale, folding and holding on to the chair. Both legs as straight as can be. And adjusting as you need to. So maybe you need to come further away from the chair or closer in, or adjust the width of your feet. Just because you start in a certain place doesn't mean you have to be there.
So we can adjust as we go?
Absolutely. Because again, it's sort of, if something's not feeling right, what's most important is that you do adjust. So it feels better in your body, because we're all different. All right, we're gonna inhale ourselves back up and just give our front knee a little bend. So we're gonna bend that right knee, keeping the back leg straight.
Looking forward.
Yeah, just looking forward. All right, on our next inhale, let's bring that back leg up to meet the other. Of course, second side. So this time, left foot's in front, right's back. Both legs as straight as can be. And on the exhale, just folding in. And again, if you had your hands up and folding, that's okay too. Just trying different ways how you can come into this pose. On your next exhale, bending into that front left leg, and you can come up the chair looking ahead. On your next inhale, bring your back leg to meet the front. So we'll just do one more standing. So we're going to have our legs a little bit wider apart. You get to choose how wide that is. Maybe it's a little bit closer. If you know that if you have socks on or you don't necessarily have that stability, keep them closer instead of wider apart. Okay? And then once again, exhale, we're going to fold forward once again. On your next exhale, giving a little bend in your knees. And on your next inhale, coming back up to standing. This is where you can just bring those feet together. We'll just do a little bit of extra poses, I guess, in our chair to close. All right. Two more things. One I love doing, and I think I do in all, which I shouldn't be doing, but anyways, practices, is cat and cow. So we're going to do it in a more calming way. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with cat. So what we're going to do is inhale, rounding our back, lowering your head and tucking your tailbone underneath like one of those black Halloween cats. And then on your next exhale, you're going to come into cow, bring out the belly, shoulders roll back, tailbone points behind you as you come into little back bend. On your inhale, coming into cat. And on your next exhale, coming into cow. And so just flowing with your own breath. Just feeling into all the different parts of your spine, base of your skull, all the way down to the tip of your tailbone. And whenever ready, we can come back to stillness. And let's just do a little bit of circling. So this is just movement into our hips and waist. Circling round and round. Just a nice way to get rid of any sort of tension or fragility. Lower back, hips. Switching directions as you're ready. And then coming back to stillness. All right, on your inhale, arms come up, reaching for the sky, nice and tall. Exhale, we're gonna fold at the waist. Let your torso come towards your legs. Let your arms, head and neck be heavy. Seeing if you can release any holding, any sort of tension. Just letting go. Forward folds are really calming. So just to end the practice before Shavasana, with this calming fold. And then as you're ready on your next inhale, rounding yourself back up to a comfortable seat. And we'll just have our Shavasana, just doing a little bit of a close, a little bit of a rest. Soften your gaze, you can close your eyes and notice your breath now. Notice how it's moving and how it might have changed from the start of the practice if you were joining us. Slowly bringing yourself back in the room, blinking your eyes, perhaps finding movement at home. Thank you for the practice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Tiffany. That was lovely. It felt like just that little bit of movement just felt so much better.
It does, and it's so funny every time, like one of the things I say in class is the hardest thing is to get to the mat. So once you get to the mat, you've done the hardest thing.
That's
Because
right.
once you get there, you're like, oh yeah, this is why I do it, right?
Exactly. That's so true. Very true. There's a question here. How would you describe the relationship between living with cancer and the practice of yoga? The relationship between living with cancer and the practice of yoga.
That's a bit of a big question, I would say. And I think that kind of gets into the philosophy of things. I think you have things to say. Go right ahead.
Well, you're right, though. I think that probably does speak more to the philosophy of yoga, and maybe acceptance is a big piece of that. And that's something, you know, again, we have a lot of really good books in the library, you know, about mindfulness and acceptance and how acceptance can be part of your practice in yoga as well. And it can be part of your life, and certainly an attitude that a lot of people take living with cancer is this feeling of accepting things as they are and rather than fighting against things. The way a lot of times we talk about cancer as being a battle. So that's what comes to mind when I read that question is that maybe it doesn't have to be so much of a battle, and maybe acceptance, the way we practice it in yoga, is part of that relationship one can develop. That's just my thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
Off the top of my head.
For sure. And to even carry on with that, I think another principle is non-attachment. Right? Because we have either aversion, so you don't want to be with something that you don't want, or attachment where you want to hold on to something that you're really enjoying and you don't want it to end. And so how we started is sort of what's known as the witness perspective. And so that's to try and sort of observe yourself from the outside. And so I always like using the analogy of a child watching a butterfly, it just sees it. And so that's sort of the same thing of acceptance, where you're just going and thinking, yes, like this is just how it is. It's not something that you've done wrong.
No, we're not resigning to, but just that the reality of what you're facing.
Absolutely. And it is hard. And I think that's where the work is, for sure.
Yeah. It's a very
big question.
And a very rich practice.
Yes.
This is a nice comment somebody made. Trained for battle, but living in peace. That's beautiful. Someone shared that. That's beautiful. That's a really lovely way of putting it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you're right that these are key components of yoga, as you said about the idea of attachment and clinging, and the practice of letting go, and how important letting go is. And it's so important when we do the work of yoga, is to be able to learn how to let go.
To not have goals, right?
Right. And it's really the path of our lives, I think, is just learning how to let go.
And I think that's with everyone, right?
With everyone, regardless of their situation.
Yes.
Yeah, how to let go more and more.
Yeah.
For sure. We have time for a couple more questions if anybody has any. I just want to remind people to, at the end of the webinar, to please complete our survey, because your feedback is really important to us. We're doing something different here today, using the space in the resource center. So if this is something that you liked, we could always do something like this again. But please let us know. Please take a moment to fill out the survey. We'd really appreciate it. We do have some great resources. So maybe I'll just show a couple of the books that we've got over here on the table.
Absolutely. And this is the one I have as well.
Oh, great. Yeah. So this is one of the books we have here, Yoga and Cancer, Yoga for Cancer. There's yoga as well.
Yep.
And breast cancer. And then we've got yoga for pain relief. And then the one that we showed earlier, chair yoga for seniors. So we're always adding to our collection in the resource center here as well. So if you have any good recommendations, please let us know. But and feel free to contact us if you'd like more information. One more question. How can we determine what type of yoga is best for us?
That is a good question.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, see, this is like questions come and I'm like, oh, that's a big question. Right? And I think part of it is listening to yourself and knowing yourself, which, can be challenging. So I would kind of classify it in two different ways. So for me, especially being anxious, is always like, go, 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 go. And so for me, the thought of doing any sort of flow, high energy yoga, it does not appeal to me at all. That's not my practice. What does appeal to me is those that are holding. So you kind of, there was the silence. I think my students have come to know that I'm often very quiet in class. And then the meditative, the restorative, the yin, because I need that to go down. But so if I just need some energy, then perhaps the more active thing is more for you. And that's sort of just even trying that, and just even if you look on the internet and you just kind of see different types of yoga and think, ooh, that appeals to you. Not just listening to yourself, I would say.
Yeah,
I don't know if you have any thoughts.
No, I think that's very true. I would say the same, that it's good to explore and be open to trying practice in different ways. And reading about it. My first education to yoga was all through books. I never didn't have a teacher for the longest time, because everything that I learned through books. So there's lots of great ways to read about yoga without even having to practice it. So and there's lots to learn. So thank you so much. We have lots of little hearts going, which is lovely.
One thing I would also say is just, convenience is a part of it too. So don't feel like you have to go somewhere, because it's like, well, I've heard this center is really great, but then there's one's beside me. Knowing that, most studios have different instructors, different sort of classes. And so, and just one thing I even say in my class, like in restorative, there's different lineages. What I first learned when I did my initial training is far different than what I learned in my specialized training. So knowing that there is a lot out there.
It's a very broad practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you guys for joining us. Really appreciate everyone being able to attend today and ask questions, and please answer, or if you can, complete our survey. So thank you again, and take care for now.
All right. Thank you.